So recently there's been a lot of discussion about adapting anime and manga to live action in films or TV, and that's sort of Ghost in the Shell that's just come out, and the Death Note trailer, the Netflix Death Note trailer that's just come out, as well as lesser known, there's just a Scum's Wish adaptation came out. Really enjoying that so far, for what I've seen, and the Real Life trailer, which looks good. I have not watched or read Real Life, but the trailer looks that good that I want to watch it. But that aside, welcome to how to make a live action anime or manga adaptation. This will also cover just generic how to make an adaptation, but it will be mainly focusing on anime and manga. So step one, and the most important step of making a live action anime and manga adaptation, is to choose your source material wisely. There are so many anime and manga series that just would not work in live action. Examples of this include Kill la Kill. I really love the anime. I like the manga. It would not work in live action. Umaru-Chan. Again, I love the anime. Live action would suck. Sorry, China. Please cancel that if you haven't already. And yeah, there are so many series that just won't work in live action, no matter how great a filmmaker you are. It just won't work. So don't do those series. Instead, do ones that would work. So examples of this are serious shows that just happen, serious ideas that just happen to be anime and manga, like Death Note, which obviously that's a good example. You've got the 4 Japanese movies, the series, live action series, and the new American Netflix film coming out, because these work because they are realistic stories and they just happen to have been made into manga first. So choosing realistic source material can work, but what if you want to do a more anime feeling adaptation? So this will be My Hero Academia, something like that. And I personally believe that could work. I really want to make a My Hero Academia live action film. It's my dream. Probably might not come true, because I'm sure somebody is going to get there and do that before I get to the proper age and skill set to do that, but I really want to make that adaptation. I go into more details on how to do that sort of series a bit later on in the video. Step 2 is to understand the source material. This is a serious big one, but I've seen a lot of adaptations where they don't understand the source material. Outside of anime and manga, you've got Batman v Superman, Zack Snyder directed comic book adaptation. Man, did he not understand the source material. He sort of just took what he thought was cool from the comics and just stuck them onto the screen, and it didn't work because he didn't understand what made it work. There is an interview with him talking about wanting some dark stuff to happen in a cave. You really need to understand what the series is about, if it has a message, what that message is, what makes it good, what its flaws are. Now, I mentioned earlier that I believe My Hero Academia could work in live action, and that is my aspiration, and a lot of you may be thinking that can't work in live action. I see where you're coming from. I used to believe that, but I started thinking about it, and step 3 is, if appropriate, place a series in a heightened reality. So for those of you that don't know what heightened reality is, it is a film where it doesn't 100% stick to realistic, generic stuff. So, for example of something without heightened reality is EastEnders, where they just get the shots, they just tell the story, whatever. And Heightened Reality, they will go to the extreme for storytelling standards or extreme cinematography, just going extreme. My personal favourite film ever made is Scott Pilgrim versus the World. You can see the Funko Pop there of Scott, and because that film really works because it embraces how different it is to reality. So for proof that it works, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, it isn't an anime and manga adaptation, but it is a graphic novel adaptation which was heavily inspired by manga and anime. So that is close to an anime and manga adaptation, and it proves that it works and it's in a heightened reality. So step 4 is, if you've got change your adaptation, you need to ask yourself why. Is it because of budget? Is it because it wouldn't work in live action? Or is it because you've got something new to tell? So if you haven't got enough budget or it doesn't work in live action, I understand. But if you're changing it because you think it's a bit silly in live action or you don't have enough budget to pull it off, make sure you're not changing it to something else that falls into the same trap. But if you've got a new thing to tell, then as long as it's good, go ahead. If it's not good, maybe stick to the original. So step or rule number 5 is, have you got a new story or message to tell? Is it worth telling? So this is a rule because why adapt certain series? Some series don't need adapting because they're perfect as they are. This is something I strongly believe for a lot of reboots and remakes. Don't just make it for the sake of making it. This rule you can ignore because I understand the mainstream often doesn't like watching anime. Number 5 is casting, and part of casting will be whitewashing. So this is a bit of a political discussion, really. It's not, but there's a little bit of that. And I don't usually get into this on my channel, but I have to for this. And there's a lot of discussion about whitewashing when it comes to live action anime adaptations in the West. I understand why studios will use white characters for their adaptations, but that doesn't mean I would agree with it. I think if you can get an Asian actor or actress to play that role, definitely go with them, unless that white person is better. So maybe there were no Asians that did a good job that wanted to play the lead in Ghost in the Shell. Maybe Scarlett Johansson was their best. So in my opinion, the only reason you should whitewash is if no Asian actors or actresses sign up for that role. Because if no Asian actors or actresses sign up for that role, then what else are you going to do? The reason I believe you should try and hire Asian actors or actresses is because it is the source material. Usually they are Asian characters. And a lot of people say, but they look white. Okay, I understand people's viewpoint, but what colour are the Simpsons? They're white. They're yellow, but they're white characters. And I think the same rule applies to anime and manga. I saw this on a video discussing this. I'm sorry, I can't remember who the video was from because it's not a person I usually watch. It's just a stylistic choice in the anime adaptation to make them look white, whereas the character is still Asian. So therefore, I believe you should hire an Asian actor or actress. But I think it's not a 100% rule. But definitely don't do what the Death Note Netflix series did, where they refused to cast Asian actors in the roles. There is a story about an Asian actor who tried to sign up for the role of Light Yagami or Light Turner in the American adaptation, and they told him, no, I personally believe you should not do that. The next step is considering your target audience. Is there even one? Because the mainstream has different tastes to the niche audience of anime and manga. I know it seems like anime and manga aren't a niche audience because of the internet spreading. A lot of people can talk online, but anime and manga is a niche interest. So the mainstream is into their brands that they recognise. That's why sequels and reboots and adaptations of series they know are all making money, whereas Ghost in the Shell has flopped. So obviously ignoring reviews, which didn't help. The main reason I believe Ghost in the Shell flopped was target audience. You have the anime and manga fans. They didn't want to see it because they prefer the original. Then you have the mainstream who just don't care. There were adverts everywhere, but it's not a brand they recognise. Unless it's a brand they recognise, the mainstream doesn't really like going to see films. They don't like taking a chance like filmmakers and film lovers do. The next step is just consider general filmmaking rules. I often see adaptations of anime and manga or video games or whatever, and people say this film here is an example of why that type of adaptation doesn't work. But it's not an example of that, it's just an example of that's a bad film. So if you're making a bad film, it doesn't matter if it's an anime and manga adaptation. If it's a bad film, it's a bad film. If it's a good film, it's a good film. Just remember everything you've learned from previous filmmaking experience or doing a course at college or university. Another thing to consider is maybe just do an anime film. I understand that anime films don't reach the mainstream, so you often have less money, less revenue, less box office success, but sometimes just doing an anime film makes for a better product, and that is what everybody should be aiming for. But not all anime films do flop, because Your Name made a lot of money, and there's obviously all the classics like Princess Mononoke, and I won't even name them. You know them all. And the last thing I've got to say is about what audiences need to do. Audiences, in my opinion, should be a bit more open to anime adaptations, because often I will see an anime adaptation and people will dismiss it just because it's anime adaptation, and I will admit I was like this at a point in time before I was more open, and I think if it being an anime adaptation just puts you off, try and prevent that. If it's like the Death Note film, the Death Note Netflix film, and you're put off by the poor casting, the over-the-top action, the lack of understanding of the source material, pointless changes, whitewashing, and if you're put off by any of those things, which I personally am, then that's understandable. But if you're just put off by the fact that it's an anime adaptation, maybe you need to be a bit more open-minded. So those are my thoughts on how to make a live-action anime and manga adaptation. Joey, the anime man, just made a similar video, although he was a bit more leaning towards the other side, saying just don't make one, but he still had some interesting points, and he presented them in an interesting way, so I enjoyed that video, even though personally I disagree with the points he made. Check it out if you want. I'll put a link in the description, or don't.